You're listening to Building the Broncos with Nick Kendell and Carl Dumler, Broncos country's leading draft and scouting analysts. Head on over to milehighhuddle.com to sound off on all things Broncos.
Hello there, Broncos country, and it is once again time for another episode of Building the Broncos. I'm your host, Carl Dumler, and with me as always, I have my co-host and good friend, Mr. Nick Kendell. Nick, man, it's a beautiful day here. How are you doing out there in Iowa?
Thank you. You gave us some of your wind because everything here is just nuts. It was cold yesterday, but I actually did manage to go disc golfing. I still got a little bit of that cold, but you know what? I need to get outside a little bit, some fresh air. And looks like it's going to be 70 degrees next weekend. So spring is here. Really excited about that. And that April is going to be a great month, man.
Unfortunately, it probably only lasts like a month and then it'll be 100 degrees. But hey, we'll take what we can get. Well, we want to make sure that you can find us on Twitter. You can find me at Carl Dumler MHH, and you can find Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. You can follow the podcast Twitter account at BTB Football Pod, and make sure to subscribe to our show and leave us a rating as we value your input on our show. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, and even that of YouTube. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and the CBS Sports Digital, to find ours and our co-writers' articles and all things pertaining to your Denver Broncos. This podcast is powered by Overtime Media. Well, Nick, we have made it to April, draft month, and it is exciting times, man. What do we got? Like 25 days till the draft?
I believe so. Yeah. Nope. It's the month of the NFL draft. Game of Thrones' newest season comes out, and Avengers: The Endgame, and spring. So I mean, I'm all about it. All those things are great. Did the Masters happen this past weekend? Shows you how little I even pay attention to actual. I have no idea.
It did not. It's okay. I think it's this weekend.
Okay. See, I'll be outside doing something.
There you go. I probably will be too. I got my golf membership. I've got everything ready to go. Got my new golf clubs. I will be out golfing. I know you'll be playing disc golf. Hey
man, that's unfortunately the disc golf course that I like to play at is pretty flooded right now. So it's an 18-hole course. We actually got 2 18-hole courses around here, but both of them are by pretty big bodies of water and are about half the holes are underwater right now. So hopefully it'll be down a little bit more. I've already been twice, even though it was like only 36 degrees on Sunday. I went out. I'm not even kidding. I'm a psycho. buddy of mine, all bundled up and like, the sun's out. We're going to go do it. But yeah, no, don't insult disc golf, man. You get to be in the trees, a little bit more secluded. I'm all about that life. And you know what? Just like regular golf, I brought along an IPA. So I think you'll be fine either way, but I don't know. I'm also not a full adult. I mean, I'm 27 years old, but I'm not a full adult. I feel like golfing is like the next tier of dad level, and I'm just not there yet. So I'll stick on my cheap end, do some disc golf. Don't have to pay for anything besides the discs. All
right. Well, when you get to full adult, you come talk to me, and I'll give you the rundown of what it looks like. All
right, man. I'll play a game of golf with you at some point. I'll need to rent clubs and everything, but it'll happen.
Okay. Well, I've got spare sets, man. I've got more clubs than you can count.
All right.
So, yeah, we'll be good there. But talking about football, because it is, like we said, draft month, man. This is this is our Christmas.
Yeah.
Our birthday, everything rolled into one. And so this is our chance to really dig deep and look at what's going to happen with the Broncos here. But we thought today we'd do a little bit of kind of looking at, let's say the Broncos don't stay at 10, because that is a real option for the Broncos. They're kind of on that edge of being able to get the guys that they want, but it seems like most of them are going to be gone. And then there's some other teams that we know are really looking to trade up for their guy. They have their guy in mind, and if he's there at 10, it really is a big possibility that the Broncos could be trading back, looking for maybe some extra picks in 2020, hint at getting maybe a different quarterback. But we thought we'd just take a little bit of time. What would a trade up look like? Who would they be going after? And those kind of big questions for the Broncos, because this is kind of a very real picture for the Broncos, like I said. But let's start with the trade up, because it seems like it's a little bit less likely for the Broncos. But are you one of those that you only trade up for a quarterback?
I think in the top 10, obviously the circumstances change. It depends on how much capital you have right now. But where the Broncos are at right now, I think that pretty much in the top 10, if you're trading up, it needs to be for a quarterback. Now, once you get outside the top 10, I think pass rushers, tackles, and cornerbacks can be in that conversation. But top 10, and considering how much it's going to cost, it better damn well be a quarterback because it's going to be expensive.
Well, I know you have your boy Quinnen Williams. You've been on this guy for months, saying that this guy is the top 2 player in this draft, and you were there before anybody else that I know of. I mean, others really joined you pretty quick, but is there any chance that where would he have to fall for you to be willing to trade up for him?
8. I think 8 is probably about the spot. I think any higher than that, I'm not going to want to give up more than a 3rd round pick this year and maybe a 3rd round pick next year. Even that seems a little bit high, and obviously 1. But if you have a chance to get the best player in the draft, I might be, because I think there's a pretty significant drop off. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about these tiers after that, but I think there's a drop off after that. And if you can get Quinnen Williams in the middle of this defense, not only that he's a great fit, but he's also versatile, which is something Fangio talked about as being important. I mean, he put on, I think it was 40 pounds this season to move to nose tackle, because before he was kind of more of a defensive end type, and they transformed his body. So I think he's got some positional versatility along that interior. So if the Lions, if he's there at 8, I would be definitely calling the Lions to see if they would be interested in swapping picks and, give them something else, and maybe their guy's still there at 10. I think odds are, though, he probably doesn't get to 8, so probably not going to happen. But hey, you never know. That's about as far as I'd go, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, last year the Broncos said that they didn't have any of their draft simulations that had Bradley Chubb making it to 5. So, I mean, crazier things have happened, but yeah, you're right. There's like a 5% chance maybe that he makes it that far.
Maybe even less.
There would have to be a lot of teams moving up to get quarterback, I would say.
Yeah, and teams, I mean, there is a path where he can fall down, but I don't see him getting past 8 or 9.
Right.
That's the big thing. Honestly, I don't see him getting past 6, because with how the Giants general manager has really emphasized defensive line, linebackers, and offensive line, I think that they'll look to go. They want to go edge rusher at 6, but they probably, like Chubb last year, the Broncos, they don't expect Williams to fall to 6. So I don't see him getting past 6. I think that is his floor. But we'll see. We never know. Right.
Okay. So here's some more realistic options then. Ed Oliver and Devin White. Is there any scenario where you're trading up for them?
Nah, probably not. Those are 2 guys that I like a lot, but considering how much you have to give up to move up for them, and the fact that, linebacker is not the most valuable position on an NFL team, and given the fact that Ed Oliver isn't a perfect fit for the defense, I don't see it. Now, maybe I got another name listed here just because he is, in my opinion, the most valuable player in this draft class, in Nick Bosa. If he fell down, I know you don't need him, but hell, at that point, you might as well call it just to see what it would take, because imagine him. Vic Fangio has done a pretty good job in his career of utilizing multiple edge rushers on the field at the same time. I mean, we even saw it last year. He'd use 3 different edge rushers, and it wasn't just that NASCAR package. He'd have some stand-up guys over the A-gap and whatnot. So if you have some positional versatile guys like Chubb and Bosa who can't, they're talking about Chubb maybe even playing a little bit more inside technique this year, when it comes down to it. And the Broncos are working out some edge rushers. Nick Bosa would interest me as well. But again, if he falls past 2, it would be absolutely incredible. So Nick Bosa, Quinnen Williams, those are the 2 I would stamp as, rubber stamp those guys. Those are the all-pro potential guys. Like if they don't end up all-pros, odds are it was like injury or some extenuating circumstance. But those are the 2 extremely elite players in this class. Other than that, got to let how the board falls to you. If not for quarterback, but I don't see any of the quarterbacks in this class ones that I would be willing to trade a large sum up for to move up for them. Maybe to 8 overall. I think there's some potential that maybe a team will try to jump the Broncos. I mean, the Bills could use some extra draft capital. Maybe they'll target a guy like Christian Wilkins if they can move back a little bit. But if you are in love with Drew Lock, maybe move up 8, maybe move up to 7. But I just don't. I don't foresee trading up being in the cards for the Broncos based on how the landscape is of this class and also talks from Dove Valley.
I'm with you. I do think, like you said, if your quarterback is there and you know that somebody's trying to jump you, if, say, the Broncos really are – I mean, it's kind of weird. A couple months ago, everybody was talking about how the Broncos were absolutely in love with Locke. And then now you've seen this kind of calm down on some of that. I mean, I know some of that was the Joe Flacco coming to the Broncos, but I do wonder some of that was kind of the Broncos going, we don't want people to go crazy trying to get ahead of us, knowing we're absolutely going to take this guy. And so I think if he is there, the Broncos absolutely love him and think he's the quarterback of the future, then yeah, you're willing to trade up. But I can't see any other scenario right now where the Broncos really move that far in that direction. And especially, like I said, for a non-quarterback position, when you know quarterback is still a need. I know there's some people out there saying the Broncos absolutely believe in Joe Flacco, that he could be their quarterback for the next 3 to 5 years. I'm not believing that one bit.
I think 2 years is what you're looking for there. Anything beyond 2 years, because his contract also gets pretty ridiculous. So, I mean, I know there's no guarantee. I'm just talking about the actual base salary and whatnot.
Right.
So, yeah, you need to be planning for quarterback 2021 that's not Joe Flacco, and that can start now. That can start next offseason, but that direction needs to start happening. You know, with the new coaching staff, Vic Fangio, all that, you know, they'll be getting Elway's ear, and they'll hopefully work symbiotically together. But that's really what it comes down to. We've been preaching that on this podcast for the past 2 years.
All right, well, then that brings us to our more realistic situation here for the Broncos, and that is a trade down for the Broncos. And let's just start off talking, what kind of compensation are you looking for to make it worth trading down? Because I really do think, like we already said, if quarterback in 2020 is kind of the direction that you're looking, I think you have to really think through what are you getting for 2020 to really help you be able to move up. Because you really, I don't see the Broncos having the number 1 overall pick, Miami.
Yeah.
And so right now, I'd say you're looking at a team that's going to have to work to trade to get into that top 5. And that could cost a little bit. I mean, I can't see the Broncos even being a top 10 pick next year. I think that they're, with their coaching staff now, I think they're at least an 8-8 kind of team. That's kind of their happy ground, I think, right now. You're looking at a team that's improved over last year, has a little bit better talent, a little bit better coaching, all those kind of things. I think that leads to at least a couple more wins on the season. And so it's going to take a little bit to get up there. So I guess what are you looking for in draft compensation to make sure you can get into that top 10, top 5 area for the Broncos?
Well, it depends on how far you trade back, obviously, and what else you're getting back from 2019. Odds are any trade back, you're going to hopefully be getting a 2019 first as well. Obviously, you know, maybe a team like the Redskins at 15, that would make a lot of sense. But there's talk about maybe a team like the Steelers or the Colts looking to move up as well and get a blue chipper. So, you know, it depends on how far back they trade. But as far as 2020 capital goes, my first preference is to get it first. You know, it doesn't matter. I don't even need any other 2019 capital. I would be perfectly content, like exactly what the Packers did last year. You know, it didn't turn out to be, I mean, I'd say it turned out fine for them, but like they probably were hoping that the Saints wouldn't finish with the 30th overall pick. But, you know, if you trade back 10, 15 spots, what was it, 19 spots, something like that, where like the Packers did last year, and they were able to get a first round pick still, taking Jair Alexander, and also have a first round pick this year. I think that's something that would be the most enticing to me. Now, obviously, it'd be great to get some day 2 picks this year as well, you know, kind of add some more depth to the roster and some potential long-term development players that you can project as starters. I mean, if they're top 100 picks, you should project them as starters next season, or that 2020 season. But if that doesn't work out, then you need to at least walk away with the 2020 second. And if that happens, then hopefully I'm getting obviously still a 2019 first, but also a 2019 third round pick. So either way, walking away with a 2019 first round pick, but either a 2020 first or a 2020 second in addition to a 2019 third.
Right. And this, it all depends on, like you said, where you're trading back to.
Yeah.
If you're talking
15 to 25.
Right. And we're going to talk about that, players that would be available in that range. 15, we picked that because Washington is looking for that quarterback of the future. So it makes sense that and we know that they're at least checking out the quarterbacks of this draft.
Very much.
So that'd be a team that's definitely looking to trade up. If there's a team that's, I mean, you have the Bengals at 11 who are definitely looking at quarterback. You have the Dolphins who are also looking at quarterback in front of them. So, I mean, this is kind of that situation. If they know the Broncos are not going to go quarterback and their guy is there, this sets up pretty well for the Broncos. Now, what does that mean compensation-wise? You can get – it's always hard. You have the draft trade chart. If anybody doesn't know what that is, they have kind of a trade chart that was set up a while ago where they give value to each pick. And so they can kind of give you an idea of how well a trade is. But to me, when a quarterback shows up, all value goes out. especially if you get two teams bidding, you can rob them blind for a quarterback. And so, I mean, that's kind of where it changes up a little bit of how many teams you got bidding for the spot, what kind of players are available, all those kind of things. But again, that's where you're kind of starting is pick 15, and then you're looking clear back to pick 25 or so. I don't think I'd go too much further down the board for the Broncos.
It depends on what somebody's offering.
That's true.
That's the difference between a 2021st or a 2022nd. I would be interested in moving down, but I mean, you're not going to trade with the Raiders probably. I think they're picking 26. Mm-hmm. So it depends on obviously what team and what they're offering. But I mean, hey, everybody has a price. And, it's people, you're talking about that trade value chart. The pick is worth whatever I'm willing to accept it's worth or whatever somebody else is willing to pay. So the trade value chart, it's a good indicator. It's definitely not, the 10 Commandments. It's not law.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I said, if there's a quarterback involved and you got two teams, one that same player, I'm sitting there saying, you both keep bidding this up till we get to that last minute. And I say, all right, you're the highest bid. Here you go. And it might surprise some teams what you get in return. I mean, when the Chiefs traded up to get their quarterback, they had to trade an extra first-round pick. I'm sure they're not hating that decision at this moment. I mean, it was worth that extra first-round pick. But quarterbacks are costly.
Yep.
They really are. You look at other teams that have traded up for quarterback, it was very costly to get there. The Redskins, that was one of the biggest trades. 3 first-round picks and I think a second-round pick.
Yep, RG3.
To get from 6 to 2. I mean, that's just crazy, but that's what it takes, again, for quarterback. But let's talk now a little bit of players that maybe fall into that range then. If, say, we trade back to 15 with the Redskins, who are some names that you're really looking at, really thinking this could be a huge addition to my team?
Well, for me, looking at 15 to 25 range, guy that, they might even take him at 10, but if I'd personally rather trade back and get the extra capital than take him at 10, but starts with Devin Bush. Devin White sounds like he's going to be going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, draft day can change things, but I don't think Devin White falling to 10 is realistic. Probably as realistic as Quinnen Williams falling to 10 at this point. But Devin Bush is one I'd be interested in. And if you're able to trade down to 13, 15, and Devin Bush is still there, and you got that extra draft capital, home run. That's amazing. Other than that, maybe TJ Hawkinson. I do like, I'm not a big fan of taking tight end at 10, but Hawkinson is a culture guy, very smart player, very fun player, and a two-way tight end, and gives them the Broncos a much-needed weapon over the middle. I know I'm definitely higher on the retaining Hireman than most, but still, he's a guy. It's essentially a one-year deal, and Hawkinson gives you a potential, maybe even a Jason Witten type. I don't want to compare him to future Hall of Fame level talents, but that seems like a player that he could be. And then if not those guys, I would look at Christian Wilkins or Jerry Tillery at that 15th pick, or potentially offensive line in Jonah Williams or Garrett Bradbury. After that, I think, it kind of drops off a little bit. One name that I will keep and I would like to throw out there, and I'm not as high on him just because his game just scares me, but that's Rashawn Gary. A lot of people have him top 10. I feel like the NFL is higher on him than draft analysts on the social media sphere. The media is. They see him more as a back end of the first round kind of guy, but everybody keeps saying first round talent, or top 10 pick, Rashawn Gary. So he's one that you got to throw it as well. But for me, probably it comes down to Wilkins, Tillery, Bush, Hawkinson, and one of those offensive linemen in Jonah Williams or Garrett Bradbury, if you're talking that 15 range. What about you?
Well, a couple other names I'll throw out there. I do like Cody Ford.
I think 15 is a little bit high for him.
It's not for me, but you and I have a little bit different view on him on some things. It would be interesting. Let's have this discussion. DK Metcalf. Because you were talking about how you don't really want that tight end there in the first round, yet you trade back and you feel a little bit more comfortable taking kind of a want pick instead of really a huge need pick, I'd say.
Yeah.
Tight end's a need. I'm not trying to say that, but when we're talking about value of the position, and so then you start looking at a guy like DK Metcalf, you add him as a weapon to that offense, and it really does change how that offense looks. Is that another name that you'd be willing to say, you know what, now I'm starting to think about this guy?
He would be somebody, as closer I get to this process, the more that I understand it's not just a talent evaluation game, but it's a personality, character evaluation game as well. And DK Metcalf, he has enough concerns that I don't feel 100% comfortable based on everything that I know taking him at 15. Yes, I know he's a great explosive athlete. I do like the flashes in the tape, but the production is still concerning. Combine that with the injury history, and I have questions there. So he's somebody that if I met him and, there was definitely we were vibing, you could tell he was kind of your kind of guy. You hear about him from the coaches, his teammates, whatever, speak highly about him. That's something I'd be more in line with 15. But just because there's enough other questions there right now as far as medicals, production, and agility scores, I do not love him at 15. Also, the fact that you already have Cortland Sutton, who is a prototypical X, where Metcalf's a little bit different kind of an X. Sutton, actually, I don't know if you remember his testings, but he was incredible with his agility drills, but not great straight line speed. So if you could give his agilities to Metcalf would be, they'll talked about as a number 2 overall pick, Calvin Johnson type. But both of them are X's. Both of them are great at getting off press. Both of them are more that size guy, not really as much a Y or the guy that, you can move around and use that for them. So not a perfect fit. But if you really enjoyed his personality, his character, came back all great, I think 15 would make sense for him. I just don't have him as high as Hawkinson personally, just because there's enough questions around him.
Yeah, I'm with you. Hawkinson would be higher on my board. I love, one, it's almost like he's an extra offensive lineman on the field.
Yeah.
Plus, you have that receiving ability. So, two-way tight ends, it's actually a pretty rare quality. And when you can find that kind of guy that makes teams have to really guess, are we running, are they throwing, that is huge to be able to add to your team. And so he definitely makes a little bit more sense compared to Metcalf, who, one, I don't think he'll have as big of an impact year one. I mean, he's going to get some great plays, but I think he's going to be almost a little bit like Cortland Sutton this last year, where you have those great plays, you see the flashes, but it's not all there. There's some limitations to what he's going to bring to your team that teams can take advantage of, that maybe year 2, year 3, you're going to start seeing a lot more of what this guy can bring to the team. Where Hawkinson, I do think he's a plug and play day one starter, going to bring you a lot on the field. Even if he's not the fastest guy at the tight end position, even if he's not the greatest receiving option, he's at least a great blocker. So there's a lot of great things to add there. But the other thought I had, or other question I really wanted to present to you, is there anybody secondary wise when you're getting to that 15 to 25 range? Because we talked about it before, Broncos either have a need at safety or they have a need at corner, kind of depending on how you view Kareem Jackson. And we know the Broncos have been looking really heavy at safety. Are there any safeties that you're looking at, or are there any cornerbacks that you're going, okay, this is actually pretty good value for you now?
There are no safeties that I'm looking at in the first round this year, just because the need isn't dire enough. I do like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I do like a guy like Darnell Savage. Obviously, you got Deontay Thompson, et cetera. But I don't think any of those guys really warrant trading or targeting in a trade down. I'd rather get a tight end or a safety day 2. I think the better value there. But as far as cornerback, I would be interested in either DeAndre Baker or Byron Murphy, maybe even Greedy Williams if you traded down to that 20-25 range, because cornerback is valuable enough for me. And I think that while Greedy's definitely the upside guy, taking him at 10, hard pill to swallow. Trading back, though, and getting him, I mean, again, we talked about this last week. That's kind of a house money move. So I'd be interested in him there. I also think that Byron Murphy, great fit for a zone cornerback. Taking him at 10, too rich for me. Taking him 25, all about it. And for the Broncos specifically, I think DeAndre Baker is a perfect fit for a heavy cover 2 defense. I mean, he literally is. I think he's a perfect fit. And if they took him back into round 1, that I think that'd make a lot of sense. I mean, we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Chris Harris Jr. next year. We don't know what's going to, or beyond next year. We don't know if Kareem Jackson is going to be more of a cornerback or a safety moving forward. I mean, they have him listed as a cornerback right now, but I mean, that positional versatility means you go a number of ways there. So if they trade back, I think there are cornerbacks I'd be interested in, but no safety this year, unfortunately. All right, well, we still have a bit to get to, but first, a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we're back.
What about some edge players? Is there anybody edge-wise, if they fell into that 15-25 range, that you're going, yeah, that's kind of nice, because they do have a need for depth at that position? As much as I know the starters are set, we talked about last week, that's one of the top 3 strengths of this team. but that depth is a huge need for the Broncos. Is there anybody that really stands out for you there?
Not really in the first round range. I mean, maybe Chase Winovich, but I feel like that's, unless like a crazy value falls to you at 10, probably edges in a round one need. I prefer the early day 3, late day 2 talents of Hollins, Banogu, who they're both bringing both those guys in for a visit, and maybe even a DeAndre Walker from Georgia as developmental depth edges that could, get bigger and bigger roles going forward, rather than take a guy back end of round 1. And running back, I mean, we talked about it last week on the episode. That's the other position that we haven't really talked about. Not a position that I don't ever want to take in the first round in general, but it's the position the Broncos are probably the most set at, and that's not a great class at the top. So running back just really doesn't add up. A couple other guys that I do want to point out, talking about trading back as potential options. Noah Fant is one. He's not as much of a total tight end package as TJ Hawkinson, but great athlete, huge mismatch ability, and with how much more and more 2 tight end sets are being utilized back, we're kind of seeing a trend back that way because of the multiplicity of that 2 tight end set. Teams are actually throwing for more yards per attempt out of 2 tight end sets than they are out of 11 personnel, so it's kind of interesting kind of see the Patriots being on the forefront of that trend again. But I think that Noah Fant would be a fun weapon that they could definitely use. And also I'd look at, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I look at Mark Andrews.
Yes.
Who Joe Flacco played with last year and loved.
Mm-hmm. And they still signed Boyle, but that's the other type of tight end. Right.
But I'm just thinking of that athletic tight end. This is the kind of guy that I think Joe Flacco could really do well with. And I mean, we saw it last year. That's exactly what happened. Mark Andrews came on the field and Joe Flacco was able to take advantage of what he could do on the field. He didn't do great, but for a rookie, I mean, tight end is one of the toughest positions to really transition to the NFL. And they were able to find different ways to take advantage of him. He had some very, very explosive plays that just make your offense just that much more dangerous. I mean, had catches of 74 yards, 68 yards. And I mean, you're just looking at that kind of thing. And so I could see the Broncos having a lot of interest in Noah Fant to really fit that explosive athlete that they need.
Yeah, he would be very fun and a mismatch weapon, and he's a better blocking tight end than most people give him credit for. It's just that that's not really his niche. He's kind of a Jared Cook, Eric Ebron type, where you can play him in line, block some, but you want to use that athleticism in space if you can, especially down the seam. So talking about trading back in that 25 range, maybe even a little bit past that, getting that extra first round pick in 2020, the other guys that I'd be interested in, the guys that the Broncos are bringing in for visits or they have met with before, Chris Lindstrom from Boston College, Dalton Risner, who's somebody they've been linked with, who, ran up to Elway at the Senior Bowl and had to introduce himself, big longtime Bronco fan, and fits there, some positional versatility as well. And then also a guy that they're bringing in that would make sense is your boy, N'Keal Harry. Is there anybody else that's I've kind of forgotten or brushed by, or any of those guys stand out to you?
I mean, N'Keal Harry is one. I do like him a lot, obviously. He's my number 2 wide receiver, and I do think he offers a little bit more year one than even a DK Metcalf. And he offers that a little bit better versatility, where I know that he is an X receiver, but I think he can play that other side.
I think he can play slot very well as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can put him there too. So I think he does offer that versatility you're talking about with having that opposite wide receiver and being a little bit different than what you're getting from Courtland Sutton. So I wouldn't mind that one bit. Again, I mean, this is where you're talking about some house money where you can kind of fill in not much, not the biggest need, but also yet you can still fill a really big hole on the team too. Chris Lindstrom is another one that kind of sticks out to me of just being able to plug and play as a starter on the offensive line. I'm not a big interior offensive line guy early in the draft. We talked about it last year and what the Broncos were going to do there at pick 5 and so many people wanting them to go with offensive line there. But again, if you're back there a little bit, you're getting a starter day one, you get a guy that's going to be there for 5 years as your starter, plus probably even more if they really show well. And these are guys that I think really can be those long-term starters for you. So, I mean, that's what you're looking for round one. You're looking for those guys you think could actually make it to second contract. And there's a lot of good names. This is kind of why I hate that the Broncos are pick 10. Because that pick 10 to about 25, 30 I think you can make an argument that there's a lot of guys that fall in that range that are very close in grades. Now they play different positions, but you're going to look at a lot of guys you can sit there and say, I like this guy. I mean, Jerry Tillery, he's one I really, really like, that I think he's being underrated a lot. I see him fall into the second round a lot. I'm going, why? This guy's a huge talent. You were talking about Byron Murphy, DeAndre Baker being two guys that fit well. Garrett Bradbury, I think he's a guy that's really not being talked about as much as he should be. I mean, there's guards that I've seen taken in the draft that I wouldn't have as high of a grade as Bradbury coming into the NFL. And so, again, there's a lot of guys to really like in this range. And so if the Broncos can't get their quarterback or they can't get Williams or White or Oliver, man, trade back just looks so good because you get that extra capital, plus you're still getting a player that's probably pretty well graded at that same spot.
All right, well, there's some options there, some trade down guys. We'll see what happens. If the Broncos don't go quarterback at 10 and they want to get their guy of the future next year, I think a trade down is very prudent. For me, it's something that I would definitely want to do if Devin White, Quinnen Williams, and Ed Oliver are gone, because I think that after those are blue chippers to me, and after that, kind of a drop off in talent, in my opinion. I do think Devin Bush is pretty up there. He's close. Jonah Williams, that left tackle, upside, versatility to play all 5 spots, and TJ Hawkinson as a 2-way tight end. Those are the guys that I would like at 10 if all those blue chippers are gone. But honestly, how important quarterback is, I think I'd prefer the trade down and getting capital. That way you can position yourself to make a move for quarterback in 2020. But that's just me. All right, well, we still have a bit to get to first, but first we're going to take a quick break.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
All right, and we are back with some questions from our listeners, a little bit of question and answer session here. And first, you're talking about it there close to the end of the last segment. We have Nbot on here who asked us the question, why is Tillery not getting any love? If Oliver and White are gone, is Tillery not an exciting option at 10? And I think Tillery was listed very high in Pro Football Focus's big board, something that kind of worth noting about that. They were an outlet that was extremely high on Chris Jones as well. Chris Jones has been compared to Tillery, and Chris Jones ends up falling to the second round, and Tillery, we'll see what happens with him, but Chris Jones ends up falling to the second round and ends up being a stud, absolute star. And maybe the same's in line for Tillery. But what are your thoughts here? Why is Tillery not getting the love of these other players in the top 10, and why is he not as much of an exciting option at 10 as others?
Well, I mean, if you look at Oliver and White, both those guys are athletic freaks. I mean, Oliver just did his pro day, and everybody on Twitter, all the draft media people, everybody is going crazy with his pro day. And obviously White running a 4.41 as an off-ball linebacker, showing up the size, weight, strength, all of that. I mean, again, those are athletic freaks that you're just sitting there saying, man, you put that with their tape where they have good tape and are athletic freaks. That's the dream. I mean, if we're really talking about it. And I'm not saying that Tillery isn't a great player. He is. I love the guy. I said in our last segment here that I think he is very much underrated. It baffles me to see him falling to the second round in some of these mock drafts. But again, he's just not to that level. He's that next tier down. And so when you're talking about that next tier down, I just don't know if he doesn't get me excited if the Broncos took him at number 10, but I'd understand it. I sit there and say, well, they got a good player and a guy that I think can be a starter for them down the road. I don't know if he'd be starter day one because I can't see him beating out Wolf or Gotsis day one, but he'd be nice for the rotation year one. Year two, because all three of those guys with Shelby Harris as well added to that list, he's going to be a starter the next year for you. So I like that, but part of me sitting there saying, if I'm looking at defensive line, maybe I'm thinking Simmons in round 2 instead of Tillery at 10.
Yeah. Or Zach Allen. A very good fit for that 4i 5 tech. Then probably will be there 41 as well. So for me, I really like Tillery. He did play half of last season with the torn labrum that he's had surgery for. But there are some issues with Tillery's tape. I mean, he does play high. He is 6'7", but that leverage issue you can see on tape. And he didn't show as explosively to me as Chris Jones did. So I do like Tillery, but I think, and I have him honestly right in line with Christian Wilkins. So I think he's that tier under. 10 might be a little bit of a reach, but if they took him at 10, I'd be interested in him. There are some questions about he's kind of maybe a little bit of an oddball, kind of some interest off the field as well. One of those guys that does he live and breathe football? That's, as cliche and as stupid as that sound, that matters to NFL teams. And there's questions there for Tillery. And so for me, 10 overall is just a little bit rich for me, just a little bit. But if they took him at 10, I'd be excited about the upside. And if they traded back and got him, I would be all about it. Some people are saying back of the first round talent. I'd be fine taking him at 15. I think with his length and his multiplicity, 5 tech, 3 tech, 4 tech, 4i, all that. I think his multiplicity is very big, and I think he's a great fit for this defense. So he's an upside pick, no doubt. There's questions there, but I'd be excited about it.
I just want to point out that Jerry Tillery did test quite a bit better than your boy Chris Jones at the combine. That
much better?
Well, he was.
I thought it was pretty close.
It wasn't. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little here. So he ran 4.93 in the 40, where your boy Chris Jones ran a 5.03. Vertical.
But he had a wardrobe malfunction though.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's true. That is true. And then vertical, beat him by 3 inches. Broad jump, beat him by almost a foot. Short shuttle, beat him by 0.3 seconds. And then 3 cone, they were exactly the same pretty much. So, it's athletically speaking, you're probably looking at pretty close same range. But one could argue that Tillery is the more athletic player of the two. I don't think he's as consistent. I think that's one of the big knocks on him is that there are games, there's huge stretches of games where he just really disappears.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he does these freak things on tape that you're like, where'd that come from? And so he's one of those guys that you're just on the edge. He's like, if you could have just done just a hair more, then of course he'd be talked in that top 10 type player. But he just didn't quite put it all together. And so you kind of wonder, one, is he ever going to reach that potential? And two, who are you getting? Are you getting that player that is that freak? Or are you getting that player that disappears at different points in games? And you just can't have that when you have a top 10 pick for me. I'm looking at a guy that I really want to come in and just be a huge, huge player for my team. Just that guy that you can really build an entire defense around. And I don't really see that right now in Tillery. I like him, but I don't love him like I love Ed Oliver. We're getting we're getting people making comments that we love Ed Oliver way too much. We talk about him too much. But he's just that freak where you see he's being blocked by 3 guys and he's still making impact plays.
Yeah.
And Tillery wasn't quite that player.
No. And to be fair, talking about that Ed Oliver hype, I think he's an explosive athlete. However, before Simmons tore his ACL, Oliver was my number 3 interior defensive lineman. So that size does matter. It is there. But I think that, I had all of them as top 10 players pretty easily. So we'll see what happens there at 10. It's too bad that he tore his ACL. Is going to miss the season. Not a great list of players that have come back from an injury after that. Teams taking him. The only recent exception that I can think of that did pretty well was Jalen Smith. So a little bit of concern there. But moving on now, we got Joe Fierro. How much does it take to move up to the number one? Yikes. Probably from 10 to 1, probably 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. I'm just throwing it out there. Who knows? It depends on whatever the team's offering. But I think 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks is definitely in the cards. And I could see the Raiders, maybe making that move. And that's talking about from 4 to 1. They could maybe give up all their first-round picks to go get Kyler Murray if they love him that much. But it would definitely take a lot, way too much for the Broncos in this class, even though I don't think – who are you moving up for also? I don't think there's any player there that the Broncos would be interested in moving up for in this class.
Right. You only do that for quarterback, and I don't think that they love Kyler Murray that much.
Yeah.
I don't know that they love the other two of Locke and Haskins to really move up that far. I don't think they have to move up that far. Probably highest that they'd have to get either of those guys would be 3.
Yeah.
And I just, and even there, I don't know how much, I guess there's a lot of people starting to make connections between Locke and the Raiders. So maybe you have that where you have to get to 3, but I just don't think the quarterback class in this group makes it where you just absolutely have to go crazy.
Yep. Not this year. Not for these guys. I would take any of them at 10, but I don't think you're trading up, giving up all that capital to move up for them. Not me. Speaking about quarterbacks, another question here. How much does it take to get Rosen from the Cardinals, and how much would you be okay with? For me, I'd be fine with the Broncos giving up their second-round pick this year and, let's say, a conditional pick next year. That could be as high as a third-round pick, so let's say third to fifth-round pick, conditional pick. But I would be fine with that. I like Rosen. I think he's still a good quarterback. I think that he's a quarterback, though, much like Dwayne Haskins will be, very dependent on his offensive line and blocking. He's not really making plays out of structure so often. He can do it a little bit, but he needs some structure around him, some protection. So that's a big thing. But I would be fine giving up a second-round pick this year and a conditional pick in 2020. Now, Broncos, I don't think it's going to happen for the Broncos. Talk is that the visit with Rosen and the Broncos didn't go so hot last year at the visit at Dove Valley. So I don't know if they political maybe or personality stuff. I mean, there's definitely some questions there about Rosen's personality, but I'd be okay with that. I don't think it's going to happen.
And there's some talk even that's why the Cardinals are even thinking about trading him, is just because he doesn't have the personality that meshes well with his coach. Mm-hmm. And there's questions of not his love for the game, but he has a lot of interest outside of football. And for coaches, they love those guys that live, breathe, eat football. And Rosen's just not quite that kind of guy. He knows there's more to life than football. And so I can see why a little bit the Cardinals are being rubbed the wrong way. He's one of those guys, he's got to fit well with what you have in place. And that's not going to be every place. And like you said, Broncos-wise, I can't see that being the best fit for them. But I'm with you. I'd probably give up a second-round pick for him. And I don't know about the conditional pick. I'd just say second and take it or leave it.
Yeah. Because
you do have that year off of his 5-year contract. You also he just got beat the crap up last year. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was sad. I felt bad for the guy.
Hard not to.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel bad for Kyler Murray if that's where he's going too. Welcome to the NFL. I think he might be wondering why the heck he picked football over baseball if that's what's going to happen. But yeah, so there's some big questions there. But a second round pick for a guy that I definitely had as a top 10 pick last year, that's pretty good value.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, moving on now. Thomas Norden. If we go quarterback, we being the Denver Broncos, go quarterback in round 1, what's the position that needs to be addressed the most in round 2?
I'm saying either off-ball linebacker or interior offensive line. Off-ball linebacker, it's easy to see. That's the biggest hole in the defense of what the Broncos are looking at. I don't know if there's going to be anybody of great value there. Maybe Mack Wilson, maybe Cashman. There's a couple other guys maybe you're looking at there a little bit. But offensive line, if you have a couple of guys that we talked about earlier, say Risner or Lindstrom or – I don't think Ford gets there, but maybe Bradbury. There's some names that if they get there into the second round, you're pretty happy because that fixes an interior position for you that right now Broncos don't really have anything set big time there on the interior. Leary coming off of injury. McGovern is an average at best starter. We talked about that before. And the other spot, Wilkinson, very easily replaceable, but he's a nice backup to have, but you don't want him to be your starter. And so if you can find a starter there in the second round that not only helps Joe Flacco year 1, but then is also a huge piece to help protect your quarterback of the future, that's a nice addition to the Broncos.
No, you are correct there. I think it's not so much position there. It depends on how the board falls. And if you're going quarterback round 1 with Flacco, probably the starter week 1 for the Broncos, that means that forget position round 2, as silly, as crazy, as abstract as that sounds. You need to get somebody who's going to make an impact year 1. So it could be tight end, it could be wide receiver, it could be linebacker, could be interior offensive line, any of those positions. But I think it needs to be a year 1 impact player, since you're taking a quarterback at 10. That guy's probably not making much of an impact this upcoming season. So got to be an impact player. Probably interior offensive line is the one I would point to, but got to be an impact player either way.
So let's say your boy Simmons falls there to round 2. Are you saying he's off the board at that point because you don't have him, because he won't be starting year 1?
If you took Locke, probably. I think that, Elway right now, he does have some job security, but I think that there's some preservation going on right now. And if you have 2 players, first and second round pick, especially 2 top, 41, no, not top 40, but the 41st overall pick of the second round, I think that if you take a player with that first pick, that's probably not going to have much of an impact this season as far as the win-loss goes. It's a hard sell to go Simmons there round 2, as tough as that is for me to say.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, moving on now. Ruan Pablo. Can we infer something about the Broncos not working out with either of the Devons on their top 30 visits? And do you know if they met with them at the Combine? I am not sure if they met with them at the Combine. I'd be shocked if they didn't meet with them at the Combine. Pretty much everybody meets with everybody informally or formally at the Combine. It's just part of the process. If they haven't met with them before, they've met them at the Pro Day, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely – the Broncos have met some with the Devons. Not taking them on an official 30 visit. I don't have the entire 30 visit. I don't think the entire 30 people are known yet either, right? Like we know some of them, but not all 30. So maybe we'll see some of these guys visit the Broncos yet in Dove Valley. But I think that you shouldn't infer anything about that. I mean, last year the Broncos reportedly didn't meet Chubb at all, and they took him 5 overall. There was the year that the Broncos moved up for, I mean, we're definitely reaching back here, but the year they took Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler had not met with him once, which is crazy to think about, or at least they hadn't met very much interest from him, and the Broncos traded up to get him. So I wouldn't infer too much into that. I think if either of them are there at 10, especially with Devin Bush, the guy that, Fangio has a connection to, the Harbaughs, Jim Harbaugh specifically, they should know about these guys already. And maybe we'll still see him bring in their 30s, but in one of their 30 visits. But I would not read too much into it, if at all.
Right. I mean, I kind of made fun of the other day. The Broncos, I guess, were going to take Locke out to a steak dinner, and that's always been the joke that's the end all for the Broncos. If you get a steak dinner, you're a Bronco. But beyond that, I mean, these visits. I don't know how much you can really read into them a whole lot. They're just that much more time to visit with some people, and some of it is a smokescreen. Broncos bringing in I think it was 5 quarterbacks for their 30 visits. You spend 1/6 of that. Is that a smokescreen, or is that real deal that they're really caring about what these quarterbacks are? And I don't know. And so for the Devons, I think they know enough about them. Neither of them have really big red flags or anything like that off the field. So there's not big things to know about on that side. Like you said, they probably met with them at the Combine. They have inside information from some of the other coaches in college and everything else. So I wouldn't read too much into it. If they're there, if White especially is there at 10, I think the Broncos are running to the podium. And I think that they would be pretty happy with that, even if not having that official 30 visit.
Yeah. So I would, like I said, wouldn't read too much into it. All right. Now we got a question here from Patrick Chiatti. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Who are some receivers you'd like to see the Broncos target in the mid-rounds, assuming they don't take one in round 2 or round 1, let's say as well. First 2 rounds. So who are some mid-round wide receivers that you like, Carl?
Emmanuel Hall. He's the guy that I'm looking at there. I mean, he might go a little bit earlier before that. Terry McLaurin. He's another guy that I would definitely be all on board because, again, that fits that model of wide receiver that's different than what you already have. And so, I mean, he makes a lot of sense there. Oh, trying to think of some other big names that I really like in that area. A guy that I like, I know he didn't test all that well. I do like Anthony Johnson of Buffalo. I know he didn't have a great Senior Bowl. He's a little bit more of that X receiver, but I do have some interest in him. Darius Slayton, he's another. I mean, you've talked about him. You got me interested in him. Darn you. Penny Hart, he's a little bit smaller than I like. But again, when you're talking about that speed area that he brings to the table, Miles Boykin, he might have got himself too high after his combine, but he's another guy that definitely has some interest from me. I'm trying to think, are there any other names that you have that you would add to that list?
I feel like this guy's getting a little bit more publicity than he should, but late round 3 to mid round 4, I'd be interested in Andy Isabella. Just for the speed factor, there are some questions about his route running and his ability to make contested catches, which has me concerned about his ability to play slot, but still great speed. I think around early day 3 is where I'd be targeting him. Mecole Hardman, another speed kind of gadget guy from Georgia. I mean, 4'3", 340, 5'10", 190 pounds, a little bit thicker version of what we had with, who is the guy that we drafted from Georgia a couple seasons ago? I already forgot him. Plays for the Bills now.
Shoot.
Isaiah McKenzie.
There you go. Boom. Joystick.
Isaiah McKenzie. Yeah. So I think a thicker, better version of Isaiah McKenzie, who's getting some play now with the Bills, actually playing pretty well there. Somebody I'd be interested in. Maybe a Jalen Hurd from Baylor, who kind of offers a unique skill set from the slot. He was a really highly rated running back prospect or recruit, I guess, that went to Tennessee and then transferred to Baylor. And, fun player, still developing, but I like him a lot. And Gary Jennings, another one that would be interesting. But mid-round, talking round 3 to round 5, you hit the guys that I'd be targeting a lot. I like Emmanuel Hall there. I really like Terry McLaurin there. I like the guy like, maybe Deebo Samuel falls to round 3. I doubt it. Maybe Kelvin Harmon falls. We'll see there. But those are all guys that I'd be interested in, those mid-rounds. Penny Hart, probably. He's more like a round 6, round 7 kind of guy. So
yeah, I
think Emmanuel Hall, Terry McLaurin are the big two that I'd have starred. But I'm also interested in maybe a Jalen Hall or a Mecole Hardman or an Andy Isabella in that range.
Should we throw a bone to our boy Cam and say Stanley Morgan?
Stanley Morgan is more of that 6 or 7 round kind of guy as well, but he's a fun one as well. I'd be interested in him as back in that area for sure. All right, so now a question from Jacob. If we traded down to the early 20s of the team, what could we possibly get back in return? Kind of talked about that earlier, but for me, it starts with a 2020 first round pick. If not, then I'm going to need a good day 3 pick or day 2 pick this year and a second next year, but you need to be targeting. If you're trading back, you need to have eyes towards quarterback in 2020, and that means early picks in 2020.
Can't disagree, man.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Building the Broncos, powered by Overtime Media. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. Also, make sure you head over to Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Digital, to find our content covering the Denver Broncos. Head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and comment, as your support can help us continue to bring our Denver Bronco deep dives. You can follow the Building the Bronco podcast and all our other great audio content by subscribing to the Huddle Up podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at BTB Football Pod. For Carl, I'm Nick, wrapping up another episode of Building the Broncos podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you soon. Go Broncos.
You've been listening to Building the Broncos. Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.